You've issued a bunch of public statements about your views on foreign policy, which are definitely within the mainstream of Republican views, as far as I can tell. You recently met with Zelensky, according to news reports. And I'm wondering if during that meeting, as a prominent Christian leader, which you are in addition to your political views, you broached the question of his treatment of Christians within Ukraine. The Zelensky government has raided convents, arrested priests, has effectively banned a denomination, a Christian denomination, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church within Ukraine, has persecuted Christians. And I wonder if you raised that with him.
I did raise the issue when we were there. And I raised it with the leader of the Orthodox Church when I was visiting Kyiv and asked him about concerns about religious liberty. He assured me that the Zelensky government in Ukraine was respecting religious liberty, even while recognizing that there were very small elements of the Russian Orthodox Church that were being utilized for the purpose of advancing the Russian cause in Ukraine, and that they were taking steps to hold them to account. But the leader of the church at St. Michael's in Kyiv told me personally that he believed that the Zelensky government was respecting religious liberty. And I must tell you, other than the sanctity of life, there's no higher priority in my life than preserving the freedom of religion in America and championing religious liberty around the world.
I'm confused. On this question, it's very clear that the Zelensky government has arrested priests for having views they disagree with. That's not consistent with religious liberty. It's an attack on it, and we're funding it. And I'm just wondering how is it, and I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but I sincerely wonder how a Christian leader could support the arrest of Christians for having different views.
Well, what I can tell you is I asked the Christian leader in Kiev if that was in fact happening, and he assured me that it was not. People were not being persecuted for their religious beliefs. Now,
he said let me
take a break here. I know we disagree on this strongly, but I respect your right to your opinion on Ukraine, and I trust you'll respect mine. Look, I've been to Ukraine now twice. My wife and I traveled into Ukraine a month after the initiation of hostilities. We traveled then with a group called Samaritan's Purse, providing Christian relief to the millions of Ukrainians, women and children of every age that had to flee that country in the face of the unprovoked Russian invasion that began a year and a half ago. I did return, took an 11-hour train ride into Kyiv, also again with Samaritan's Purse. We not only met with government leaders, but we met with Christian relief workers. We're literally rebuilding homes of people in small towns, little hamlets, that a year ago were being shelled by Russian tanks, while the people in that community were just sitting in their homes. I mean, the truth is, what I saw was not just evidence of war, but I saw evil. And I believe that it is in the interest of the United States of America to continue to give the Ukrainian military the resources that they need to repel the Russian invasion and restore their sovereignty.
Would you, may I ask, would you be, and I believe you have a good faith position on this, and we have disagreements on it, but I want to just, I can't let you elide over the question of the treatment of Christians and clergy.
I know, I heard
and
that
would
again,
you be, well, no, but hold on, would you be
problem is you don't accept my answer. I just told you that I asked the religious leader in Kiev if it was happening. You asked me if I raised the issue, and I did.
And I'm saying
I also raised it with the Ukrainians, and I was told that there are religious leaders who have been working with the Russian military that is murdering people by the thousands.
Okay.
I mean, Tucker, look.
Wait, but hold on. Don't you think...
Let me explain to you what I think our national interest is there.
I would think you would have greater concern for religious liberty in Ukraine. And I'm surprised by your answer.
I told you I raised the issue of religious liberty.
No, you spoke to one person who's clearly on one side of it, and there are many, many news reports that are not disputed by anybody that many clergy have been arrested in Ukraine. And I'm merely saying I may not agree with their views. I'm not Russian Orthodox, but you can't arrest clergy for having different views, period. Because if you do, you violate the basic tenet of religious liberty.
I want to be clear with you. I won't stand by it. I won't stand for it. If people are being persecuted for their religious beliefs, I won't stand for it. In any country with which the country of our nation is supporting or our allies are supporting.
Yes.
Period, paragraph. But let me say to you, our national interest in Ukraine, I believe, is born of the fact that I spent 10 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives. I spent 4 years as Vice President. I've met Vladimir Putin. Let me tell you, if Vladimir Putin overruns Ukraine, I have no doubt that in a short period of time, that Russian military is going to cross a border of a NATO country that our armed forces will have to go and defend. You know, I started the day this morning at Rosie's in Zionsville, Indiana, with my son, Captain Michael J. Pence in the United States Marine Corps. My son's a fighter pilot. My son-in-law is a Navy fighter pilot. And I'll tell you what, I never want to see American armed forces in Ukraine. I want to give the Ukrainian military what they need to fight and repel the Russian invasion. I think we need to stop them there so that our men and women in uniform are never called upon to stop that Russian military when they cross a border that we would have to defend.
So you would oppose Ukraine entering NATO? Because that would, of course, immediately require us to go to war with Russia, which you oppose.
You know, I said very clearly that Ukrainian entrance into NATO should depend on when the war is over. And I made that clear with President Zelensky that that was my view. And what I understood in speaking with him was he understood that it needed to be conditional. If we were to allow Ukraine to join NATO today, then the obligations of the NATO Treaty on Mutual Defense would initiate immediately, and we'd be pulled into a conflict. I don't want that to happen. But I do believe that after the war is won and over, that welcoming Ukraine into NATO, embracing them with open arms in the West, is in the interest of our security and of our nation in the long term. And let me also say, I think this fight is also about China, Tucker. I know we don't talk about that enough. I know a lot of people say, and you may hear from some other candidates in this race, that we ought to be focused on China. Well, I gave the first major speech in our administration, changing administration policy on China. We called them out. We imposed tariffs. We rebuilt our military. I mean, in a very real sense, we were tougher on China than any administration in the modern era had ever been. But I really do believe that by giving the Ukrainian military what they need to repel the invasion, we will also send a deafening message to China that America and the free world will not tolerate China's military ambitions in the Asia Pacific, or their intention that becomes more clear by the day against Taiwan or any other place. But I really do believe peace comes through strength, and the United States of America needs to continue to project strength. But let me say one last thing.
But we've run out of ammunition, so we're sending them cluster bombs. So because we've sent our ammunition to Ukraine, which has not yet won the war, whatever that means, no one has defined it, but isn't that prima facie evidence that we have become weaker militarily by our support from Ukraine, or how am I missing something?
Well,
we're out of ammunition, so we're sending cluster bombs.
Well, first off, since Joe Biden took office, he's been working to cut military spending. And frankly, the recent debt ceiling deal that was done, if they don't pass all their 13 appropriations bills, will result in a 1% cut in our military spending after inflation in 2025. Look, China is floating a new battleship every month in the Pacific. We don't need to rebuild our military. We need to build a military strong enough to meet the challenges America will face in the 21st century. And as President of the United States, I'll do that. Amen. I promise you.